The moment I walked in, I already knew where I didn't belong. The hall smelled faintly of polished wood and candles, a deliberate warmth that made the edges of my anxiety sharper. My mother was at the head table, flanked by aunts and uncles, whose smiles were polite but distant, as if they had all rehearsed the boundaries I was never meant to cross. The kids' table, plastic chairs, cheap paper napkins, and a sense of temporary invisibility was my designated space. "You can sit with the kids," my mom said, tossing me a plastic fork across the table with more force than necessary. "Just be glad we let you come this time," my aunt added with laughter that was more sharp than playful. I caught it in the corner of my eye, the way she leaned slightly forward as though punctuating my low status seat with a performance. I took the fork and sat. My hands hovered over the plate, unused. The food, carefully arranged by caterers, seemed absurdly ceremonial for a place where my voice would go unheard. I ate in silence, letting the warmth of the room and the chatter of grown-ups wash over me without participation. Every joke I didn't understand, every anecdote I was not included in, tightened a coil in my chest, not anger exactly, but a meticulous awareness that I was cataloging silently. At first, I tried to lean into conversation with the other kids. We made small talk, awkwardly trading observations about the decorations and the music. But even here, the shadows of grown-up exclusion follow it. Comparisons made quietly by adults, whispers of how little I contributed to the real conversation. By dessert, I stopped talking entirely. My silence became deliberate, a quiet measure of attention to detail. I noticed things that were easily missed. The way my uncle reached first for the champagne, the way my mother's laughter cut across the table just as someone tried to interject. The small nods and eye rolls shared among grown-ups were a language I could study. I memorized patterns, who wielded influence, who deferred, who merely performed authority. During the main course, my aunt told a story, expecting me to laugh at the punchline I didn't understand. My hesitation earned a chuckle from her, patronizing in tone. I held my face still, stared at my plate, and let the moment pass. It was an internal test, a rehearsal for something I could not yet name. By mid-afternoon, the first wave of speeches had concluded. Adults congratulated one another, shared secret smiles across the head table, and I remained tucked in my corner, eating slowly, observing closely. My stomach churned less from hunger than from the constant reminder of my peripheral position. Then came the final minutes, the time when attention drifted from ceremony to logistics. That's when he walked over. The event manager, a tall man with calm authority, approached me with a clipboard. "Hey," he said, glancing down at the document. "You're covering the $3,600 balance, right?" I froze for just a fraction and then smiled, a slow, controlled gesture. I looked up at him and, without hesitation, pointed toward the head table where my mother and her circle were seated. "Ask the grown-ups," I said, my voice level. The words landed with a subtle gravity. The manager blinked, glanced at the head table, and nodded, making a note. He walked away, leaving a silence that felt heavier than any laughter or whisper from the earlier hours. I could feel the shift, though quiet, almost imperceptible. A recalibration of expectation, a boundary silently enforced. I returned to my plate, picked up the fork, and continued eating. Nothing had erupted, no dramatic confrontation, no overt humiliation, but the atmosphere had altered. My position, once assumed irrelevant, was now recognized. Not by my family, but by someone whose authority could not be ignored. The head table shifted slightly, eyes darting, unspoken questions hanging in the air. I allowed myself a subtle satisfaction, tempered by awareness. This was not victory in a storybook sense. There would be no applause, no newfound affection, no sudden acknowledgement of my worth. Only a private assertion of leverage, calm and undeniable. When I finally stood to leave, my aunt made a passing remark about finally growing up. I smiled faintly, remembering the $3,600 and the manager's quiet intervention. Words were cheap. Authority, verified by reality, had weight. Outside, the evening had cooled. The city lights blurred in the distance, and I felt the tension loosen slightly in my chest. I hadn't changed them. I hadn't reshaped the hierarchy they had maintained for years, but I had changed my position within it, just enough to be heard when it mattered, enough to be counted, if only by the ledger and by someone outside the family's performative control. The ride home was quiet. I stared out the window, replaying moments. The plastic fork, the laughter, the smiles, the pointed gesture toward the head table. Each memory carried a subtle charge, a mixture of satisfaction and restraint. I could feel the shift internally, as if a weight had been balanced, not removed. In the end, I didn't need acknowledgement. I had clarity, control, and a measure of dignity quietly reclaimed. The family remained the same, witty, flawed, unaltered. But I had left the table with a boundary no longer invisible, no longer subject to polite dismissal. The grown-ups might have had their rituals, their laughter, their assumptions, but I had my own quiet authority now. And that was enough.